We come to lesson 8 in our introductory to Greek. And lesson 8 is prepositions. Prepositions are small words, but they can be highly theological. Couple ground rules or just some things to keep in mind, some housekeeping before we start as it relates to prepositions. As I mentioned, prepositions can be some tremendous indicators of theology. And they will guide and be a kind of a rudder on the boat where I can really see some uniqueness and specificity of the thought or the context of the verse with the preposition. The prepositions can be that. However, I want to keep a balance there with a word of warning, because prepositions I can also kind of press them a little further than they need to be pressed. So be careful with them. Also, as we're going to see tonight, we've already learned prepositions that have single cases. For example, in lesson 5, we looked at prepositions that were used with only one case. Apo is in the genitive case. Eis is accusative, ek in the genitive, and then an would be in the dative. And we saw that they had an interpretation, a translation for there. Good hermeneutics realizes that even though that first of all, words can have multiple meanings. A single word can have multiple meanings. But all of the meanings of that term, according to good hermeneutics, are not always at play in every context. So just because a word is used does not mean that I have in my interpretation toolbox every one of its uses available to me. That term has a unique understanding in that context. So when we come to prepositions that are used with multiple cases and they have different nuances and meanings, I have to be careful that I don't apply all of the possible meanings to that term in this context, in this particular passage. So I just need to be aware of that. Also, as it comes to prepositions, there's not much, there's not other techniques besides just good old rote memory. And that's what you're going to have to do tonight, is begin just memorizing and learning. Translating will help, but there's just no substitute for memorizing. So, lesson 8, with regard to prepositions, we see prepositions that are used with 2 cases, and we see prepositions that are used with 3 cases. We have 6 prepositions here that I want us to look at. All of these we're going to see used with the genitive and the accusative case. Dia, kata, meta, peri, huper, hupo. Notice the rough breathing mark over both of these. In English, these two, we see it like this. Okay, I got it swapped. Hypo, hupo, hyper, huper. Okay, so this would be the English renderings of that. So we have dia. You'll notice dia would be the prefix of like diameter. And so what does diameter measure? It measures through something. So this is dia with the genitive would be through, or with the accusative it would be because of. Okay, and so you just need to memorize that. So we have kata with the genitive. Now you'll see this in not with the genitive but with the accusative. You'll see this in the preface of New Testament books, the Gospels. You'll have kata Mattheon, according to Matthew, and so. In the accusative, kata would be according to. In the genitive, it would be against. Against. Next, we have meta, much like meta-narrative, and meta means with. It's not necessarily alongside, but it is with, like with the Lord would be the genitive. Accusative would be after. Okay, after. After death. Peri, we have perimeter, which measures around something. Also, it would be like a periscope to look around, and so peri is going to be with the genitive. It'll be about. I'm looking about, and with the accusative, it would be around. Period. Huper, hupo, huper is going to be translated for or above. For or above. Genitive, for, accusative, above. Hypertension. Okay? It'll be above. Now, hupo is going to be almost its contrast. It'll be below. Hypothermia. Okay? Below warmness, below temperature. And so these are prepositions with 2 cases. Now we also have prepositions with 3 cases. Here's 2 of them. Epi, which means upon. Okay, and it essentially means upon in all of those. Upon. And then para. And para means from or with or beside. These are used quite frequently. Like for example, epidermal, epidermis, para, you got paragraph. Grapho is to write, para to write with, so sentences that are written with each other. So you'll have these are used quite frequently. Now, you just got to memorize these. Prepositions with 1 case, 2 cases, 3 cases, definite articles, adjectives. Those case endings will help me. If I know that if this preposition is used, then I know that case ending will be at the end of any noun or any adjective. Okay. So these are the prepositions. Learn them, memorize them, learn them, memorize them. Now, compound verbs. Compound verbs will oftentimes take these prepositions. Compound verbs are often formed by taking these prepositions and you add them to a verb stem or an existing verb. For example, you take balo, which means to throw. You have ekbalo. Ek means out of. Plus balo means to throw out of. This is the term used in Matthew 4. At the end of Matthew 3, Jesus is baptized, and we see the sound from heaven coming from the Father's voice. He says, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." Matthew 4:1 says, "And the Spirit, ekbalo, led Jesus into the wilderness." And if you contrast ekbalo with how Satan approaches Jesus, it's really a stark contrast. It appears that the Spirit thrusts Jesus into the wilderness. And the verbs used when it says that the devil took him to, the idea is a very arm around, and he's guiding him in a friendly tone to the next place of temptation. But anyway, ekbalo, I have my preposition plus my verb. Parakaleo, you'll see my preposition para, and I've got kaleo. Kaleo means to call. Para means alongside. This is the term for Holy Spirit, paraclete, comforter. One of my favorite ones is anastasis. You may have heard somebody named Anastasia. I have the prefix ana, which means again, and the verb from this, from which the verb form of this, the verb stem of this, is from histemi, which is a me verb, and it means to stand. And so anastasis means to stand again, and this is the term for resurrection. So really, really key. Now, word of warning. Some real cool word studies, but be very careful. A hermeneutical fallacy is to take compound verbs and read and do eisegesis, read entirely too much meaning into it. For example, in English, if I take the word saw, S-A-W, and the word horse and put them together, I have a compound word, sawhorse. Now, if I'm trying to understand that, if I was trying to be theological about that, I would not take the meaning of saw and the meaning of horse and then say, okay, that is what these two terms mean. No, I would get nowhere near what it is. So be very careful that with compound words that you don't explode it out, isolate the interpretations, and then interpret it with the words separated. I need to do the synthesis. The words got to stay together in order for me to apply the correct interpretation. So compound verbs can be great, fruitful word studies, but be warned. One other note is when you do have compound verbs, and if I'm adding a preposition to a verb, some things can happen. These are called elisions, E-L-I-S-I-O-N. Elisions can happen. So if I take apo and put it to ago, which means I lead, I've got vowels that come together. Well, what happens is the omicron drops out, and I essentially have op-ago.